I don't know if you can hear me. If you can wave your hands. Okay, the issue is we can't hear you. Those of us on Zoom cannot hear your audio. That was the reason for raising my hand.
Where were we?
If I may, I think if the public couldn't hear us under public comment, we probably should
Yeah.
redo that item
Yeah.
for open comment.
All right, so this is a continuation of the regular meeting of the Ross Council, Thursday, April 14th. We had some audio difficulties at the beginning, and we apologize for that. Let's go back to item number 7, which is open time for public expression. Are there any members of the public online who would like to offer any comments? Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Any raised hands, Linda?
No, Mayor, there's no raised hand.
All right, and then let's go, we're at number, well, let's see, 10B. Is there a report from the Ross Property Owners Association?
There's
Okay.
no raised hands.
So then now we're at item 11, the consent agenda. No members of the council or members of the public here wanted to remove any items from the consent agenda. Are there any members of the public online who would like to remove any of the items from the consent agenda?
No raised hands.
Then is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve. Second. Okay, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember McMillan? Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
And Councilmember Cole?
Aye.
The motion for consent to items A through C passes unanimously.
Thank you. That brings us to item 12, public hearings on planning project. The first is and only is 30 Walnut Avenue, design review, hillside lot permit and variance, and town council consideration of adoption of resolution number 2244. Town planner Weintraub.
I had it on. Just,
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Planner Matthew Weintraub. The planning application at 30 Walnut Avenue requests approval of design review, hillside lot permit, and variance to construct new landscape and deck improvements. The project is designed to be compact and to comply with the minimum required setbacks to the greatest degree possible. The overall project, including a new pool, complies with the underlying zoning district setbacks. However, the property is restricted by hillside lot setbacks due to an average lot slope of 30.5%, which is only a 0.5% greater than the minimum threshold. Approval of minor encroachments into the more restrictive hillside lot setbacks are requested for small portions of new decks, entry trellises, walkways, and a pool equipment enclosure. The project would reduce the overall impervious coverage on the property by replacing the existing concrete driveway with new permeable pavers. The project is supported by the Advisory Design Review Group. An initial concern raised by an adjacent neighbor with respect to a proposed deck improvement was addressed and mitigated during the design review process, and the neighbor has stated that they support the final revised project. The project is supported by the Ivy Drive Road Association, which has requested that Ivy Drive not be used for construction, parking, or traffic. The applicant has agreed to not use Ivy Drive for construction, parking, or traffic. The staff recommends that construction vehicle movement be addressed during the building permit review process with a construction vehicle management plan. So in summary, staff recommends that the findings can be made for design review, hillside lot permit, and variance, as explained in the staff report. Staff recommends approval of resolution number 2244 as proposed, authorizing the project to proceed to the construction review phase, and staff is available to answer questions that the council may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Matthew from council members? Are there any comments from members of the public in town hall? Would the applicant like to present any more details about the project? It's not necessary. You can also speak at the end of the public input. It's up to you. Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public online who have any comments about this project?
Yes, it looks like Ward Ching, so I'll bring him back in.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the recitation of the results. I just wanted to acknowledge that the Ivy Drive Association is very much in support of the project, and thank you for acknowledging that Ivy Drive will not be used for any stage of the project in terms of staging, parking, or any other part of the project. Thank you very much for that clarification as part of the go forward plan.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from members of the public online?
Yes, Mayor, I am bringing in Tilda.
Mute there. I am a neighbor. I live at 26 Walnut, so it's 2 doors from number 30. And I did submit a letter. My concerns have mostly to do with the parking and equipment that will be part of this project. Walnut is a very narrow street with sharp turns and very limited parking. A lot of the houses on Walnut don't have on-site parking, and we use the streets. Historically, we have a kind of an informal understanding of a parking plan. So I'm just hoping that their property is large enough that they'll be able to keep most of the construction equipment, the pickup trucks, et cetera, on site and not have to take neighbor parking on Walnut. And of course, the standard concerns of dust and noise and those sorts of things that accompany construction. I hope that they'll be addressed as part of the permit. So that's my comment. And I did submit a letter, and Mayor Robbins did respond and acknowledge it.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments from members of the public online?
No, ma'am.
All right, then let's bring it back to the council level. Are there any comments or questions? Councilmember McMillan.
Matthew, I assume that Ms. Thompson, Tilda Thompson's comments will be addressed in the construction management plan, is that right?
Yes, thank you, council member. Those issues would typically and commonly be addressed during a construction management plan during the building reviews phase, and that would include construction parking and traffic and dust control and erosion control.
And are you contemplating requiring the construction vehicles to be on site, parked on site, or parked at somewhere else and have people brought in?
So on-site parking would certainly be considered. The available spaces would have to be looked at. This is something that would be considered more closely during a construction management plan development, which typically does occur during the actual building construction phase, involving planning staff, excuse me, building staff and public works staff working with the applicant to determine what the best way to proceed is. So the answer is yes, those would be included.
Are there any other questions from council members? Is there a motion?
Move to approve. Second.
All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Bragus?
Aye.
Council Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
And Councilmember McCool? Sorry.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. That takes us to item number 13, presentation by Mark Brown, Executive Officer, Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority.
Good evening, Mayor Robbins, council members. My name is Mark Brown, Executive Officer for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, and also had the honor to serve as your Deputy Fire Chief through the aforementioned agreement between Marin County Fire and Ross Valley Fire, and personally a position I very much enjoyed. I just wanted to say that. So tonight we're here to talk about the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. This is a follow-up of a community-wide meeting that we had on March 10th, which was the first meeting of a series of 2 meetings that we'll have on this. And then I asked each of our board members to, or let them know that I'd be more than willing and happy to and encouraged any participation at council meetings so we can help spread the word about this and answer any questions that you as council members may have or any of the citizens here in Ross. Quick background on the MWP, I'd be very quick about this. Our mission statement's on there, I won't read it to you, but what I find important on this slide is it shows our stakeholders, the land managers, our residents, our civic leaders, our first responders, and the developers and our business owners. And what I like about this project and what I think you'll see as we go through it, it hits all of our stakeholders very well. And it's one of the reasons why the MWPA was created, is to be able to be a convening resource to bring these types of stakeholders together. I do want to mention our goal areas and where this project fits in, but more importantly, I want to talk about our strategy, because there's many people that look at a shaded fuel break and they go, well, that's not enough. But that's not the only thing we're doing, and so that's why I want to talk about this slide. We have what we are calling a house out strategy, or a systems approach. I'm actually going to start on that middle square, the reduce the risk to homes, because our approach is based on being house out. So we are working with our residents to decrease the ignitability of homes, decrease the ignitability of the vegetation around their homes. We're doing that through educating the public, our inspection program, and also we're providing grants to our residents for low income or matching home hardening grants so that we can encourage the work to get done. And then the next part is improving our evacuation system. So the MWPA is working with each of our member agencies to improve the evacuation routes, to harden them. Our goal is that if someone is in their car on an evacuation route, they'll be safe in that car. They won't have to exit that car, even if they are in a traffic jam. Because quite frankly, during a wildfire evacuation, traffic jams are inevitable. It's something that is very hard to avoid. We're also improving our notification and evacuation systems. And then this project falls within reducing wildfire fuels. There's reducing wildfire fuels right on the community edge, which this project is geared towards. And then there's also overall forest health that we need to improve, because it's the unhealthy forests that are creating these catastrophic and very dynamic and fast-moving wildfires. And so we're working with our land management agencies to help improve the overall forest health, to help eliminate the chances of these catastrophic fires. So this specific project, Central Marin Fire, and Todd Lando, I have to mention Battalion Chief Todd Lando's name. This is his baby. He's the one that put this together. He's the one that rallied the support of all the member agencies within the Ross Valley. There's been a tremendous amount of work from MWPA staff, our consultant Panorama, and another consultant by the name of Vibrant Planet. But I want to emphasize the amount of work from each of the member agencies and how much they've been putting towards this project. So it is one of 111 projects that were proposed for 21-22, but it's the most ambitious project. And this is where Todd's vision is playing out. He wanted to propose this project in 21-22 because he knew how much the scoping and environmental compliance, how involved it was going to be. So he proposed it now so that we can be ready to work on it for 22-23. And so you'll see in the timeline in a little bit, that strategy worked very well. It'll be a continuous reduced fuel. It's not removing the fuel, we're reducing the fuel at the community's edge. And it's an initial effort. The planning was the initial effort, but it's also the initial effort for the future of the MWPA. We see this as a model project for the other MWPA zones to follow. Now let me talk about some expectations for a fuel break, because there's many people that will bring up the Tubbs fire and go, it jumped a 4-lane freeway. What good is a shaded fuel break right up against our community? So let's talk about what we expect out of a fuel break, especially a shaded fuel break. First of all, there's a ton of exposure to mega fires. But the fact of the matter is mega fires account for less than 1% of the fires that we experience. And I feel that we should be focusing on the 99% of our fires. And if we all do our efforts towards 99% of the fires, then we become stronger for the 1%. We can have a 3-acre fire impact a home faster than a fire engine can get to that home. And this is where a shaded fuel break like this will stop that, slow the spread or stop that fire before it can damage a home. We actually have numerous examples already in Marin of this type of work, stopping a fire or allowing the firefighters to get in. Now let's talk about our expectation of a shaded fuel break under an extreme situation, under that mega fire. Is it going to stop the mega fire? Absolutely not. The embers are going to flow far further than that shaded fuel break. However, as the embers are approaching the community, it'll land where we have done our work. Instead of those embers igniting and becoming new extreme fire behavior type fires, there'll be low intensity fires as it approaches the neighborhood. And then as the main fire front approaches the neighborhood, it hits the shaded fuel break, fire intensities go down, rates of spread go down, and that gives us more time to get people out of the community, more time to get the firefighters in, and a location for the firefighters to fight fire. So that's a description of our systems approach and how a shaded fuel break can help. So getting into the specifics of the shaded fuel break, these are very detailed slides. I am not going to go through line by line. There are terms that are in this slide that are basically necessary for us to go through our environmental compliance. The project objective, quite simply, a continuous shaded fuel break around the community boundary between the wildland and our quote urban areas or wildland urban interface. And we are using state-of-the-art scientific modeling to determine the size and shape of this. It's not just a firefighter's eyes going out there. And then we are going through a comprehensive environmental process to make sure that we align 100% with CEQA. I may have mentioned it's 38 miles long. Every community in the Ross Valley will be touched by this. We also have public lands in Marin County parks and open space, and they are working side by side, and any work on parks land will be part of our environmental compliance. We're also working side by side with Marin Municipal Water District. However, they've already done the CEQA work for work that would be done on their properties. So it's not included in our environmental compliance but it is included in our overall scope of our project.
Can I ask, are the entities like MMWD that are not our land or not part of our, are they paying for that work?
The MWPA can pay for work on private and public lands, but our expectation is that the land management agencies will share the cost and not just have the MWPA fund the entire project.
But the wildfire agency, which includes all our tax dollars, we're not going to pay MMWD to do the work on land. Is that accurate?
We would not pay them to do the work, but we could pay the contractors to do the work on their land, but we would look at it as a cost share with them.
I guess one of the questions, the reason I'm asking is because when we voted to do that tax, we knew that Golden Gate National Rec was not joining, Marin Municipal Water District was not joining, and one of the questions that came up for a lot of people was, if we tax ourselves, are we just going to give our tax dollars over to entities that are not sharing to do the wildfire prevention work that needs to happen on their property? And I'm not clear from your answer whether you're saying that is possible or it isn't going to happen. They're going to pay for their work on their property.
Well, if for sure, the MWPA will pay for projects that are on public lands. And the reason why we are willing to do that, now we don't want to be the only funding source for that work, but the reason why we are doing that is our ability to ensure that that work gets done. If we have that mechanism and that public agency may or may not have the funding to do it or may not have prioritized it, then it creates a hole in our strategy.
So essentially, yes,
Yes,
we
we
may
will
be funding other entities.
Correct. We will be funding work on other entities' land, potentially. Any more?
No, that's
Okay. So project description, and here's where the words that we have to use to match up with what's called the California Vegetation Treatment Program is the features of it. Generally, it will be a 200-foot wide project. Again, we're not removing fuels or all fuels. We are removing the dead and down, the invasive non-native species that are prone to fire spread. We will be removing smaller, unhealthy trees and shrubs. Essentially, we're creating separation. What we're looking for is to eliminate the ladder from the ground up to the canopies, or from one bush to another bush, one plant to another bush, just breaking up that continuity. Overall, if you look at the 38 miles with 200 feet wide, it's 1,379 acres. And then 1,313 if you exclude the MMWD lands. Some of the locations may go up to 300 feet. That is, again, based on our scientific fire modeling. 497 acres, I'm not going to go this. You guys don't need the detailed numbers, but we have a breakdown between the what's considered a WUI reduction area and the actual fuel area. But I do want to mention that most of the work is going to be manually done. It will not be heavy equipment out there driving around. It's going to be workers walking into it, especially because of access. Much of it is going to be just hiking along backyards, sometimes working with our neighbors to get through the yards. And it's going to be hand tools and chainsaws by far the vast majority of the work. And what's always in everyone's minds is, all right, I see that big map, let's look at the Ross map. So here's what it looks like for Ross. And if you look right in here where I have you can't see my cursor, so I'll use the pointer. Here you have Ross Commons down in here. You have the seminary here. And so you see where the shaded fuel break comes around the Kent Woodlands, comes back in around, and follows exactly the WUI boundary. And you'll notice that it would have been really easy just to cut this piece off, but that's not what we're aiming for. We're aiming for having this fuel break go be right against the edge of the community. And so that increases some of the length of it, but it puts it right where the homes are. And because if we left that gap here and a fire started in here, then we wouldn't have any defense for those homes right on that boundary. We are fortunate that we have some of the best modeling for fuel in the state through our Community Wildfire Protection Plan, and using state-of-the-art fire modeling to determine where the fuel break should be and how wide it should be. When we estimate that it'll take up to 5 years to complete the entire fuel break. And the thing about fuel breaks that you have to consider is that they are now permanent infrastructure. And if you don't maintain them, they're going to go away. And you can't say it's always going to be once every 3 years, once every 5 years. It really depends on the location. Some locations, the maintenance is going to be every year because it's grass where that we're doing the work. So the prescribed herbivory, or that's the fancy way of saying goat grazing. Well, that'll have to happen every year. But when we start getting into the brush models, then it'll be every 2 to 3 years. If we start getting into the timber areas, it'll be every 5 years where the maintenance has to occur. We have prioritized the overall fuel break because it really wouldn't make sense to start from one end and go to the other. So using the fire modeling, I have prioritized the areas. What Ross residents may not like is that out of the top 11 priorities, Ross lands in number 9. And that has to do with the risk of fire for the area. But what I want to point out is priority number 3 is here just to the northwest of Ross. Priority 4 is in the Kent Woodlands. And those actually poke out and provide some defense to the town of Ross before we can get to that. Just some pictures, because without really hearing a description of a shaded fuel break doesn't really mean a lot. So this is the Citron Bowl in Larkspur. Here you see acacia encroaching on this meadow. And now you see the meadow post work. You see these are young oak saplings that are starting to grow that you couldn't even see because of the acacia. Up in this hillside here, there was no longer any acacia. You see it up here. And then I like to point out this tree. We're not pulling everything out because sometimes dead vegetation provides incredible habitat. So that tree was purposely left there to provide habitat for animals. Again, this slide shows that we don't remove everything. Here you see Scotch broom encroaching on this fire road and the top of Summit Avenue in Corte Madera. Now, it's not going to completely stop a fire, but you can see by the removal of the ladder fuels and you don't see the brush that's going to lead up to the canopies of the trees, it's going to decrease the fire behavior in that area. Again, you see many of the dead and down and unhealthy limbs and unhealthy trees are pulled out. So we're not creating void areas. It's just shaded. And then this is one, it's hard to see in this picture, but if an ember were to land in this dead and down vegetation right here, it would quickly ignite, carry to the canopy, whereas now it'll come here and it'll simply smolder and be ground fire. And that's how we see that we're going to succeed with this program. I'm going to go really fast past this slide, but this is the process to go through the California Vegetation Treatment Plan. And that's how we're going to get our environmental compliance done. We really need private landowner participation. The property within their property lines, the work that needs to be done within the individual's property really needs to be done by the individuals. But further away from the homes, we may be partnering with the private property owner to do quite a bit of the work. And I mentioned the second meeting. So after we approve our vegetation treatment plan and we're ready to go to work, then we'll have another community meeting to let the communities know how this work is going to roll out. Quick timeline, you can see we started our efforts in September. Here we are, and we had our community meeting in March. We have our draft PSA or project specific analysis submitted. And we are looking to go to the board of directors for the MWPA on May 19th to approve and implement almost possibly early as June, but most likely in August. And that's it on the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, but I would like to touch on some of the other things that we're doing because I know insurance cancel. Yes. Excellent question, thank you. So we have spent or will spend $243,000 for the scoping and environmental compliance. And we have applied for a $3.5 million grant to be spent over 2.5 years from CAL FIRE. And then we estimate $1 million to $1.5 million from MWPA funds annually to fund this project.
Can I ask, who's doing the work? Is this like tree companies or?
It'll be various contractors between private tree companies. Some of it may be the Marin County Fire Department TAM crew, our Fire Foundry crew, which is a new initiative, AmeriCorps. So it'll be a mix of public and private. I'll actually bring up two examples. So when the Caldor Fire crossed what they like to call the granite line, which was the second fire in the history of the state to cross the granite line. The first fire was to Dixie. So we had two significant things happen that had never happened before in 1 year. And as the fire was approaching the Tahoe Basin with 150-foot flame lengths and it hit treated areas, the flame lengths went to 15 feet. And then Pollock Pines, many of you may be familiar with Pollock Pines. And I actually got to talk to a firefighter recently that was in Pollock Pines, and they had a very similar treatment program as this in much heavier fuel under very critical dynamic conditions. It was a significant firefight for them, but they were able to save Pollock Pines that they would not have been able to save without that shaded fuel break there. And if there's no more questions on this fuel break, just quick effort to talk about our efforts on insurance, because we know that there have been a lot of talk about cancellations and non-renewals, not just talk, but actual actions of cancellations and non-renewals. So we have been actively partnering with our insurance companies, meeting with them, discussing how we can combine our inspection program, a certificate from our program that would prove that our residents have been taking action, and then a promise from the insurance companies to not cancel or non-renew. A group called Wildfire Partners in Boulder, Colorado have established a model that we're following, and we've had early indications that it's being well received by our insurance companies, and that's part of the California Safer from Wildfire framework. Currently, though, the insurance companies are saying they want to provide their own inspections rather than trust the fire agency's inspections. And to a degree, I can get that. They want to have a little bit of trust and faith that the inspections are accurate. So we need to earn their trust and faith that our inspections are actually accurate. And then perhaps we can avoid residents from having an inspection from the MWPA and then an inspection from their insurance company. And we are also working with the insurance companies to perhaps provide financial incentives as a return on their investment. If they're going to stay inspecting or insuring in Marin and California, they see that if they invest a little bit in helping their insured do home hardening and D-space, then that's actually a good return on investment for them. And finally, just a little, you guys may have seen this already, but defensible space inspections in Ross should start April 18th, so 4 days from now. And with that, I'll take any more questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Brown?
Well, I guess I have a quick personal one. If we've been inspected once already, can we expect a further inspection?
That is a fantastic question. And yes, we are striving to inspect every residence in the county once every 2 to 3 years. However, you might start seeing that increase in frequency because we are seeing the best way that we have gotten compliance is by the follow-up inspections. So we are going to look to find ways to fund the inspection program further so that we can have those re-inspections to get the compliance rates even higher.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for Mr. Brown? Are there any comments about this item from members of the public in Town Hall? Are there any comments about this item from members of the public online?
No, Mayor.
Then thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation and all your work. Thank you.
For having me. Have a great night.
Item 14, Town Council discussion and approval of a memorandum of understanding between Marin County Flood Control and Water Conservation District and the Town of Ross for maintenance and construction responsibilities for the Corte Madera Creek Flood Risk Management Project. Rich Simonich, Public Works Director.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you again, Mayor Robbins and council members. Tonight, we're going to discuss and approve or vote for approval of a memorandum of understanding between Marin County Flood Control and Water Conservation District and the Town of Ross for maintenance and construction responsibilities for the Corte Madera Creek Flood Risk Management Project. So this is one of my favorite slides here. This is the fish ladder here, and this is the 2017 storm, which was less than a 10-year storm. You can see the private property being flooded and pouring over the concrete channels. So that just gave you a little perspective of the project and what we're talking about tonight. So the Corte Madera Creek Flood Risk Management Project is a regional multi-jurisdictional project. Here's Ross is right here. The project, the phase 1 project, runs all the way down to the natural channel here by Kent Middle School and up through College of Marin, and continues through Granton Park, Kent Field, and into Ross. The fish ladder is right there, Ross Post Office. Going to get this steady here. So Ross Post Office is right here. So tonight we're just considering the memorandum of understanding for the Town of Ross portion of the project. So this next slide sort of highlights the project elements within the Town of Ross and shows the property line boundaries of the properties owned by Ross and the Marin County Flood Control District, and highlights a couple structures. So here, just to give you reference, here's the post office building. Here's the creek channel and the Lagunitas Bridge here. So we run downstream, and then the fish ladder is right here. So this portion within this dashed line area is already the Marin County Flood Control District property. They own an easement across a portion of some Ross land owned in fee by the Town of Ross and some private property. So the memorandum of understanding does not include any of that work in there. That's already within the Flood Control District's property. So we're concerned with this area within here. And there's 2 structures of note that are going to be constructed with this project that will require maintenance and consideration under this MOU. So this is a retaining wall just behind the post office. Its main function is to provide stability to the slope and to preserve these trees up here at the top of bank just across from the post office, and allow the channel efficiency to let the water flow through in this area. This structure, the second structure, is a 2 to 3 foot high sheet pile wall used to bolster up the bank on this side of the channel. Everything else is just in-channel improvements, grading, and tree removal and that sort of thing. So the two structures that we're going to be concerned about as far as maintenance and repair is this retaining wall, 2 to 4 feet high, and then this sheet pile wall, which is about 2 to 3 feet high. So a little background on the timeline. Back in August of 2021, the Flood Control District Board adopted the final EIR, an alternative 1 project description, and I'm sure we remember that process. The alternative 1 we did not pursue the Creek Park at Frederick Allen Park, but we did go for that prime target of removing the fish ladder. So that's what this project primarily removes: the fish ladder, provides a transition in between the fish ladder the concrete channel, the location where the fish ladder will be removed all the way up to the Lagunitas Bridge. And then just a few months back, In February 2022, Town Council adopted a resolution number 2238 conditionally approving the design review for the Corte Madera Creek Flood Risk Management Project Phase 1. So project benefits. Project provides 25-year flood risk reduction benefits to 55 residential properties in Ross, 10 commercial properties, and 5 institutional properties, including the Ross School, the Town Hall, the Emergency Services Building, and Public Works Building facilities here on this parcel. It provides some flood risk reduction benefits to properties during the 100-year flood event. And most of the flood risk reduction benefits are, of course, due to the removal of the fish ladder. So the key points of the MOU are the flood district will provide monitoring of the project elements for compliance with regulatory agency permit conditions for a period of 5 years after completion. And basically what that means is the regulatory agencies require after construction for annual reports on how the project is functioning. If there's any erosion problems, if there's problems that may not have been identified during the EIR process, or whether they are actually complying with some of the conditions of the final EIR. The other key point then is the district will provide maintenance and repair of those 2 project elements that I pointed out for a period of 10 years after the completion of construction. And then just a general mutual indemnification clause between the flood control district and the town based on performance and individual duties of the parties involved, as described in the MOU. It's a basic mutual indemnification. So the next steps in the process after the MOU is conditionally approved tonight, if it is, we receive the final MOU document signed by the Flood Control District Board for signature by the town manager. So the reason we don't have a final tonight is because they don't have the final design, the 100% drawings completed at this time. So they don't have the critical Exhibit A that would be attached to the MOU. So once the Flood Control District knows that the town is okay in general with the MOU, they will take it to the Flood Control District Board for their approval with the 100% drawings, which I believe is 3 to 4 months down the road. And at that time, if there's no substantive changes, we bring it back for signature by the town manager. Then we will receive those 100% plans for review by our Building and Public Works Department. Most of the review will be done by our plan review consultants. Then followed by issuance of building permits subject to the design review conditions and an encroachment permit agreement. Finally, we're going to review and accept the real property appraisals to record temporary construction easements over the town properties to allow the flood control district contractor access and staging during construction. So we'll be bringing that item back to council for consideration of the appraisal compensation that the county would be offering for the acquisition of temporary construction easements. And these are all, there's no certain order. They're in fact somewhat concurrent with each other. So staff recommends that town council approve an MOU between the Flood Control District and the town of Ross for indemnification liability, maintenance, construction, and other responsibilities related to the Corte Madera Creek Flood Risk Management Project, and authorize the town manager to execute the MOU once the MOU, barring substantive changes, has been approved and signed by the Marin County Flood Control and Water Conservation District Board. That concludes my presentation, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council members for Mr. Simonich? Council Member McMillan.
I have heard, Rich, that this work is not going to take place for at least a year. So why are we trying to get this document done right now?
Well, that is true. The removal of the fish ladder is most likely not going to take place until at the earliest 2013. The main reason we're bringing it tonight is just to start the review and consideration process as needed. There's really no reason not to bring it forward to our town council for review, and you're more than welcome to continue the item for consideration. But it's important to note that there's nothing really that's going to change from the current 60% level drawings. So if we wait now or we wait 3 or 4 months, it's going to be the same presentation that I have tonight.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Simonich? Councilmember Kircher.
I have some questions concerning the draft of the MOU.
Yes.
The section 6 on liability, indemnification, et cetera, refers to any act or omission of the district or its employees, sub-grantees, or agents. What is a sub-grantee?
Maybe the town attorney could address that better than me.
Let me start by saying we did try to clean this up so to get a lot of the legal jargon out of it that didn't make sense. I would have to ask them who they meant by sub-grantee. That's their language. If someone there, someone who might be working under them as a grant, receiving the grant of whatever work they're doing. But it's meant to address the flood control districts, contractors, employees, anyone who comes in. Maybe there's, we'd have to ask that question of them. I'm not familiar enough with the project of who they're going to bring on to necessarily take advantage of that provision.
I mean, it seems to me that there are 3 things that could be an or omission of the district that could cause damage to some third party. One would be in the design and construction phase, but it's not clear to me that this would cover situation, because I'm assuming that the district would use, well, I know it would use contractors, but it would probably use outside entities to do the design work and the construction. And it seemed to be they probably would, those construction firms and design firms would not be sub-grantees. But I'm just wondering if there is a defect or there is a design problem or a construction defect that manifests itself later, as latent defects often do, is there an identification duty by the district towards the town? Because obviously we're not involved in the, well, I suppose we are to the extent we approve, issue permits and approvals, but essentially the district is controlling the design and the construction. Anyway, that's one concern or issue that I had. Any thoughts on that, if that were to happen?
Yeah, so maybe an example of a sub-grantee would be after the construction is completed, we hire a tree contractor to remove some trees upstream, and maybe by removing a tree, it causes another tree to become loose and shake loose during a storm. Those sort of things where we hire a separate contractor, I think would be a good example of a sub-grantee. And on the same flip side with the county and their various contractors that they would hire during the maintenance process. Latent defects in construction, that's always an issue that we did get the 10-year repair and maintenance agreement, which is 5 years more than they gave San Anselmo for their Creek Park project. So, but we'd have to rely on the indemnities that were in the design review process and the indemnities that are laid out in this MOU and the recommendations of staff and the attorney that we're in pretty good shape to move forward.
I just Googled word subgrantee, and it means the government or other legal entity to which a subgrant is awarded and which is accountable to the grantee for the use of the funds provided.
I mean, it seems
Well-
this would not cover their contractors, outside agents, would be independent contractors.
So do you mean, are you questioning whether 5 years is adequate because 10 would be a typical statute of limitations for the act?
But I'm wondering if this would extend beyond that for a latent defect that manifested itself 15 years later. Well, the wall fails, water goes rushing in, and that's property. Concern was, would we right of indemnity back against the district which controlled the design and construction process? And really had to be experts, the hydrology experts and the others, presumably, that could assess these things.
Yes, so 2 answers. One, we did make a few edits to this agreement that made it clear we're relying on their hydrologists and their expertise, that they agreed to those edits. And then also, we do have our resolution approving design review, which is a more blanket indemnity relating to the project or the resolution. So I think there's, potentially 2 avenues to address your concerns.
I guess there's always the possibility that we don't have any floods for 12 years and the first water hits and there is a problem. So I wonder if it, it can be not just duration, but duration or 2 major floods, whichever comes first.
I will say we had a robust conversation with County Counsel's office, and this is the extent that they're willing to indemnify the town for this project, given that in their minds, it's for the benefit of the town, and it was the town requested this project.
Okay. Other questions? Councilmember Cool.
And isn't it true, I guess I'm addressing this question to you, Ben. Isn't it true that if the problem that Bill has raised were to occur, we still would have non-contractual indemnity rights?
Correct.
Are there other questions from council members?
I'm sorry. One concern I had reading this was whether by spelling out indemnity provisions, we would somehow preclude on non-contractual liability. I mean, the argument that we've already agreed to these terms, and so there is no further liability. Just really getting into the weeds.
Right. I mean, I think with public entities, you always have if we are sued for inverse, we always have the rights, despite the indemnity clause, to sue for contribution and equitable indemnity. And I've been involved in some of those lawsuits with other public entities, and the contractual language doesn't waive that right.
Okay, so that sounds like it's not an issue.
Yeah, I just want you to know, because I have always complained quite a bit about this thing, that I did get a chance to look at this before and talk to Ben about it, and I even had some modifications proposed as well that got incorporated in here, and I think it's, this is what I liked was Ben's talked me into where we are now was, smaller project. We are not drilling underneath straight 2 giant holes. We're doing a pretty modest project. There is a period of time. I didn't ever think about this issue, and I think Bill's point is a good one. There's nothing in here that says we're waiving a right. If a contractor did a defect, there's 10-year statute of limitation defect. There's nothing in here that says we waive our right to any claims against contractors for construction defects, right?
If we have those rights, we aren't waiving them. I'd have to research whether we have those rights directly to the contractor for that because it's not our project, right?
Are there other questions from the lawyers about this? It's kind of above my pay grade. Any other questions from council members? Are there any comments from members of the public who are in town hall? And are there any comments from members of the public who are joining us online?
There are no raised hands, Mayor.
Then let's bring it back to the council level. Are we okay with approving this? And if so, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember McMillan? Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
And Councilmember Cole?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Now we're at item 15, Town Council consideration and approval of the preferred payment method and rate for public use of electric vehicle charging stations at Ross Post Office parking lot. Public Works Director Rich Simonich.
Yes, me again. Thank you, Mayor Robbins, members of the Rosstown Council. Tonight, consideration of the payment method and electricity pricing for public EV stations at the Ross Post Office. So just really quickly, the EV station location here at the Ross Post Office. Hopefully I'm not too shaky here. So here's the post office, and you've all probably seen them by now. We have a single head here at the accessible stall. It had to be located on the side where the van loading area is. Then we have a dual head here at the two standard stalls, for a total of 3 charging heads. So pricing policies, the ChargePoint is the company that we purchased these EV charging stations from, and they also provide the cloud services. And with that comes several actual flexible methods of setting up a pricing policy and how you can charge for, or the town can charge for electricity, or charge the public for electricity when they charge the vehicles. So the first one and most common is the pay by the kilowatt hour. It's flexible. You can set your kilowatt hour dollars per kilowatt hour rates. I can vary it by the time of day. You can have it higher during peak hours and lower during off-peak hours, and that change it during the time of year, during the summer, during the winter, whatever you want to do. I can do all of that as the cloud manager under the direction of either the town council or the town manager. We're going to decide that tonight as well. You can pay by the hour or the minute, so that kind of works like a parking meter. You can be flexible with that. You can have, say, the first hour could be free, or the first hour can be at a reduced rate, and then the second hour gets a little bit more expensive. Those sort of things provide an incentive to the person to get their charging done early and get their car out of the parking lot, taking advantage of lower rates, that sort of thing. With the pay by the hour, you do need to consider the voltage at the station to price this correctly. And I've noticed throughout the different agencies in Marin County, they are charging extremely low rates. They'd probably be more in line if they had a 220 volt meter, but they're on a 120 volt. They are not getting a very good cost recovery on some of their per hour meters. So I'm pretty familiar with the formula and how that voltage and the amperage works to set these prices. I learned a lot during the process of developing this staff report. And there are overstay fee options where parking type fees can be applied if the vehicle remains parked after the charging is complete. So they pull in, they set the charger in their car, and they park there all day. We currently don't have the means to charge them for that or enforce them yet. That would require an amendment to our parking ordinance. Then there's the rate pricing considerations. So the cost per kilowatt hour. So I pulled the PG&E bill for this particular meter. That's it's an existing meter that runs the irrigation pump for the post office lawn and that area. And we currently pay 28 cents per kilowatt hour during the peak times and 26 cents per kilowatt hour during off peak. So I kind of, for my basis, I kind of selected 27 cents to start with, kind of in between the two. Then you consider the monthly fees for cloud services and maintenance provided by the ChargePoint company, and that's it comes to about $29 per month per station. I looked at capital recovery of comes to about $30 a month if I capitalize the out-of-pocket costs that we paid for these after the TAM grants are taken into account. So $30 a month capitalized over 10 years at 6%, is just as an example. And then there's the provider session fees. So ChargePoint collects 10% of all session fees. So when you look at the bottom line, the town would need to charge 37 cents per kilowatt hour based on this current usage model that I came up with of 3 sessions of 1.5 hours per session each day. So I have the ability through this cloud server to monitor and get reports and develop what the actual usage is going to be over a few months' time, 6 months or a year, where we'll be able to dial this in a little bit better. But for now, all we have is kind of an estimated model based on what Larkspur was experiencing a few years back. The accessible space EV station will typically experience a lot less use, and it will typically require more subsidy, right? Because it's just sitting there. We're paying for the cloud services and all of the rest, but probably not going to be used much. But California Building Code required us to install a EV station at that accessible space. So higher use means a lower break-even point. If more people, if we see the model is 5 or 6 sessions per day for a couple hours per day, we can see probably the ability to maybe lower the rates over time. And we do want to continue to monitor that to make sure that we're not overcharging or excessively undercharging, and make adjustments if needed. So with that, the staff recommendation is for town council to approve staff's recommendation of charging by the kilowatt hour at the rate of 30 cents per kilowatt hour to EV users at the Ross Post Office, and delegate the responsibility for all future EV charging station pricing and payment policies decisions to the town manager. And so that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Simonich? Councilmember Cool.
I have to admit that I don't understand a lot about electric vehicles, but am I correct in understanding or in thinking that to fully charge a vehicle with any one of the chargers we have would take way more than an hour and a half?
Well, maybe Krista, can you answer how this one charges, which is 120 volts? So it's not a very powerful charger, the one at the side of the post office. And
Well, thank you for the opportunity to answer with my
I
experience.
don't have an EV vehicle. I don't know.
I actually, I'm not a building person, but it takes 5 hours for me to charge my Volt here, my Chevy Volt, and that gives me about 44 miles in the range. However, I thought it was a higher voltage because at my house here, I have 120 volt. Isn't that a normal plug in a house?
Yes.
And it takes like 15 hours in my house. So are we sure it's only 120?
Yeah, so the difference then is these ChargePoint, these commercial chargers are 40 amps, which is a pretty powerful circuit. If you're just charging off your regular 15 amp house charger, it's going to take a lot longer. So
here it takes 5 hours. I'm grateful.
Right, so these are at the 220 volts, kind of the same voltage you plug into, is the higher load. So you'll see half of the charging in half that time. So you'd see probably 2.5 hours would be more likely a typical charging session. But the model that I have probably assumes people are only charging for an hour and a half because they're just got an hour and a half of shopping to do. They're not going to sit around for another hour for a full charge and sit on the curb and, you know, that sort of thing. So, thank you, Kristen.
Councilmember Breckus.
You know, I'm not really concerned about full cost recovery or how we charge. I mean, I think if you're changing it all the time, that could be a little bit of an issue in terms of expectations and just signage. But what I care about is the parking and the eliminating of parking spaces. So I just want to understand, is it correct that there used to not be two ADA parking spaces in the parking lot closest to the post office, and now there's two that are new, and then there's a charging station that has been added there exclusively for the ADA use? So then I'm confused. Do you have to be both have an ADA sticker and an electric car to park there? And then I just didn't understand. I mean, I don't, you know, I don't know that we restrict it to, you can only park here for an hour with the goal of, you know, then it becomes another one of these like 20-minute spaces, which are barely used because not that many people are using them. So I don't know if there's a way you could do it where, okay, during the school days or during, you know, the busy times in town, which are Saturday mornings also probably, you know, you can park there as long as you want. Or, you know, because if you have to move the car, then it's just killing another space in my mind. So I'm confused about that part.
Okay, so let me start with the number of accessible spaces, to my knowledge, has not changed since I've been here. Those two by the rec trail were there, and then the two that are on the northerly parking lot next to the post office, those have always been there too. In fact, the sign there on the northerly side of the parking lot is now illegal. It uses the word handicap, and we should be taking that one down. But we haven't changed the number of accessible spaces.
Maybe they just got painted, so I noticed it. But I also think I was looking at the, you know, the new EV port, and I was, you know, so is that EV port for that ADA space, and is that person now, you can't, if you're ADA but you don't have electric, you can't park there? Or how's that going to work?
So those are great questions. So currently, anybody can park at the standard stall, and anybody can park at any accessible vehicle with a handicap placard can park at either of those two handicap stalls. We currently have nothing in our ordinance that prohibits any cars from parking at these EV stations. We would need to modify the parking ordinance to actually state that we are enforcing EV station only parking at locations where the EV charging stations are. We currently don't have that, so that'll be another council action which we can, if we'd like to go that route, we could do that. Or if you want to keep it open and not, as you mentioned, not lose a parking stall, we can just keep status quo right now. So we can't write parking tickets for any gas-powered vehicle that parks in those stations currently.
Okay, so the plan is not to say something like EV only or anything.
That is up to the council. If they would like to do that, we can make that happen.
That's where you'd like to start, is just leave it open for the time being to see how we manage. Is that right? I mean, and if we find out that EV vehicles we're hearing complaints that people who want to charge their car can't park there, then we'd have to change it. Is that your thinking?
I think that'd probably be a better data point than we have right now as to how it should work.
But it's a starting point. We sort of start where we are, and then we modify it in a few months if we find that people want to park there and they want to charge there and they can't.
Right.
Councilmember McMillan.
I disagree. I think, you know, that the whole purpose of this was to allow cars to charge, not to allow anyone to take up a parking spot and preclude other people from charging their cars. That was the whole point of why we got these things in the first place. So, and it's 2 spots, right? And then it's the handicap spot.
But it's only
whatever I'm
one
supposed to
spot,
call
isn't it? Because
No, it's 2.
I thought there were 2 handicap spots with the EV charger.
No, we only had to
It's
install
only
one.
one.
head,
I
yes.
see, so it is 2 parking spots, okay.
So
Got
I think we should try with a restriction and incentivize people to drive electric and charge their cars, and see how that works. And if it doesn't work, if they're empty all the time, then we can do plan B. I don't think they're going to be empty all the time. I think there's a lot of teachers and workers and people who patronize Ross shops that will want to charge their cars. And that was the whole point.
But then the next question is, okay, so you got a teacher who's got a 5-hour job. Is Spot going to say, you can charge for 2 hours and then you got to get out of here? I mean, then you get into the weeds on how you do this, and you actually prevent a teacher from using it because they don't have breaks like that, you know?
All their stalls are marked EV parking only, so I can only imagine they do have the ordinance. So if maybe at the end of tonight's meeting, if a couple of council members would like the staff to put that on the agenda in the future, we can consider that.
Okay, other questions from council members?
It's disheartening to think of this item being brought before us one more time because we've really beaten a dead horse on this one.
Are there any comments from members of the public in town hall? Any comments from members of the public online?
There are no raised hands, Mayor.
So then, before us on the agenda is the charging method, and the recommendation is, as you see, to charge by kilowatt hour, and it's 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And at the moment, there's no requirement to move the car. That's not, in the motion, or that's not in the proposal. So this is what we have to approve tonight. Is there a motion to approve this?
No public comment, or did we take that already? I can't remember. Okay,
There wasn't
move to
any.
approve.
Second.
Just to be clear before we take the vote, the move to approve is both the kilowatt hour and delegating authority to the town manager for future adjustments.
Yes.
All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember McMillan? Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
And Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item 16, Town Council review and direction to staff on a proposed request for proposals for consultant services for the preparation of a town facilities master plan. Want to stand up for like a 5-minute break? Let's take a 5-minute break. I'm sorry, we'll take a 5-minute break and then do this. Thank you. Shall we resume the meeting?
Yes.
All right, so now we will resume the council meeting. We're at item number 16, Town Council review and direction to staff on a proposed request for proposals for consultant services for the preparation of a town facilities master plan and town plan Wolvering.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm pleased to present this report on the Town of Ross Facilities Master Plan RFP. The town and associated agencies have been studying municipal facilities and emergency services in the town for some time now. And there have been a number of studies prepared and reviewed and discussed by council members and community members. Those studies include an historic resource evaluation that was prepared in 2016, a facility replacement program and budget study in 2020, and a property condition assessment that was prepared and reviewed in 2020. These studies have indicated a number of deficiencies in the municipal facilities that we have here in the town of Ross and support preparation of an overall master plan for facility replacement and modernization. Given the complexity of preparing a master plan, it's important to have the expertise, the professional ability to prepare such a plan. Staff has prepared a request for proposals, an RFP, for your review this evening. In terms of the RFP and the master plan process, there would be a number of tasks that the consultant or consultant team would have to undertake. These tasks include facilities and site programming and developing alternatives for consideration. Public engagement. It's extremely important to have robust, broad public engagement in developing a master plan of this kind. There would also be an initial assessment of environmental impacts and also comparative cost estimates prepared as well. Tonight, staff is recommending that you review the RFP that's attached to your staff report and provide direction to staff in terms of moving forward with the RFP for consultant services to prepare the town facilities master plan. There are two key parcels associated with the planning area, this master planning area. One of those parcels is right here, where Town Hall is located. And another is across the street, across Lagunitas Road. This parcel here, on which this building is located, is about 2.33 acres in size. It's assessor parcel number 073-19116. Town Hall, the Public Safety Building, Public Works Building, the Development Services Center are all located on this parcel. Across the street to the south is another site that's a part of the overall master plan area. And this site is 073-24227, and it's about 33,400 square feet in area. And it's commonly known as Kittle Park, and it's vacant at this time. But it's a part of the overall master planning area. In terms of background, just general background on this planning area and some of the facilities. Town Hall and the firehouse, which was the original public safety building, they were designed and constructed in 1927, 1928 by the well-known architect, designed by John White. And the style is Spanish colonial revival. The public safety building, as you all know, has been altered significantly over time, expanded, internally modified, apparatus bays, etc. There's been substantial alteration over time. These studies that I mentioned that you've reviewed, I believe, in the past and discussed, these studies identified a number of deficiencies with respect to current building and safety codes within these facilities. There's been significant deferred maintenance, and there's a need to modernize these facilities to accommodate efficient delivery of municipal services and emergency services and overall community needs. Some of the functions in these facilities, current functions: town hall, town council chambers, administrative offices, document and record storage, the Development Services Permit Center, the Police Department, paramedic services, Public Works, a cellular communications facility, and community spaces. The fire department is also located within this setting. Based on studies, discussions, and public processes that you've had to date, it's been determined that the fire department component, including the fire apparatus, the engines, etc., would no longer be located on this site, but located elsewhere nearby in Marin County. However, the determination has been that paramedic and police services and facilities would still be housed on this property. I know that council has inquired about housing within this overall planning area, affordable housing specifically. And to point out, in the current housing element in the implementation program, it does indicate that within this area, the northerly area of this site, there's the opportunity to consider, say, up to 4 affordable units on this property. As staff looks at this master planning process and kind of thinks about community engagement, costing, how to break this down, we see it as a 2-step process. The first step or phase would be this current RFP. And the focus of phase 1, this current RFP, is to assure community engagement, to assure a detailed project description, an overall master plan that addresses the needs of the primary municipal facilities, emergency services, and community needs. The considerations in this process, this phase 1, would be to receive community feedback, understand through community feedback and studies what the potential community and environmental impacts might be of alternatives. As you reviewed the RFP, the proposed RFP, you notice that staff is recommending that there are alternatives, 3 alternatives. The idea with that really is to make sure that there's community input, council discussion, evaluation of options and alternatives, and that issues such as community impacts, environmental impacts, cost considerations, efficiencies in terms of grouping functions are all considered, leading to the determination of what a preferred alternative might be for moving forward. Staff would assume that as a part of this phase 1, that the level of environmental review would be more of an initial study environmental review, analyzing what the impacts might be of the 3 alternatives, but not a detailed environmental review, but a sense of what the environmental impacts might be and community impacts might be of the 3 alternatives that would be considered. Once that detailed preferred alternative is determined, the community should have a much better idea of costing, for example. And I could well imagine that along the way, going through phase 1, and certainly at the end of phase 1, you would have an understanding of what the cost or cost range could be to do this project. And at that point, to be looking at how to finance it. How are you going to finance this project? And then move into phase 2. Phase 2, you've got a detailed project description, hopefully an understanding of how you're going to finance this project. And phase 2, you're moving into detailed architectural drawings, improvement plans, a formal design review, approval of a design, a final design, preparation of construction documents, bid documents, and then looking at what makes sense, what's appropriate in terms of phased construction, phased implementation of this project. The RFP that's before you, it's attached to your staff report, could be sent out later this month to qualified professionals, teams. And the intent would be that by the end of May of this year, that proposals would be received, and then a consultant identified and brought forward to council for selection. The criteria for consideration of the consultants is in the RFP. Once that would occur, then staff would be bringing to you for consideration a particular consultant or consultant team to move forward with phase one. That is my overview. That concludes my staff report, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions from council members? Councilmember McMillan.
I don't think so at this point. I think that you have studies, you have a variety of options and considerations that have been considered in the past. But at this point, you need to bring all of that information together, assure a really robust public engagement process, and then determine a detailed, well-defined preferred alternative to go forward. You're not there. You do not have a detailed preferred alternative at this point based on my review of your information. You've done a lot of studies, you've got a lot of information, but in terms of coming to agreement as a community, in terms of a clear direction, I don't see that you have that at this point.
Is the clear direction the elements of the project and not so much the location of these buildings?
It's all of that. It's the location of the buildings, it's the circulation, it's the functions in terms of, at this point, it's my understanding that the fire department services, fire department apparatus would be located elsewhere. But in terms of the staff report and what I've already mentioned, a full range of functions, administrative functions, community development functions, paramedic functions, police functions, et cetera, would still be here. And so it's determining building location in terms of phase one, parking, circulation, functions, grouping of those functions in terms of efficiencies, community space, et cetera. And evaluating all of that, say with 3 different alternatives as we were suggesting, so that you can see the benefits and weaknesses of those individual alternatives and have the benefit of looking at what are the community impacts, what are the potential environmental impacts, what are the cost comparisons of those alternatives, and coming to a point, likely a hybrid, where you agree on a clear preferred alternative, and then you move forward with your, what I determined to be a phase 2. And you have the opportunity with that clear understanding also of better costing in terms of then determining financing. How are you going to finance this project?
So would we be asking the consultant to provide 3 different alternatives for how this could be done? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And is town hall, are we planning to keep town hall as is? So that's not on the chopping block, that stays. Maybe cushions for the chairs, but it stays, okay. Councilmember McMillan.
Julie, pressure microphone. There's no one. Okay, sorry. Do I need to repeat?
You should, maybe.
Oh. It's critical. No, I'm trying to understand if we have this master plan and we want to go to the voter and ask them for a parcel tax approval or a bond approval, I assume that the master plan would be something that we would use as a vehicle to help them have to be more tangible. What we did when we tried to do the Measure C for Ross School, we did not really have a master plan, and it was kind of like a trust us moment, and with the bond measure that we proposed was defeated. For that and a number of other reasons. We didn't characterize it as a remodel, we characterize it as new construction, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just wondering how this kind of a document would help us in terms of financing.
I think it would help you in terms of defining the project. And it also gives you opportunity as you're defining the project to have a full public engagement process. So it's an opportunity to bring the community together as you're evaluating options and alternatives, leading to a preferred alternative. So hopefully in that process, you're not only coming up with a much clearer option for moving forward, a defined project basically, you're also bringing the public together into the process to have some understanding and ownership as to where you're headed. I would think that would be very helpful in terms of then moving forward with securing financing.
And all the public outreach and workshops, et cetera, that are going to be necessary for the housing element, where would you envision all of the public outreach related to the development of the master plan? Would it be overlapping? Would it be after? You thought about that?
You know, it likely would be there would likely be some overlap in that, and that's something I think that the town manager and others will need to look at in terms of staff capacity, council capacity, community capacity, to make sure that you can focus on the housing element update and give it its due consideration, and then daylight this process in a manner that likewise gets its due consideration, and you're building that support for whatever financing you end up using for this project, this one we're talking about tonight.
Thank you. I'd just like to add that first, I think it's a way of, when we're engaging the community with the housing element, it is a good way to kind of give them a heads up that I'm interested in being engaged. And so I think this could build off the housing element. But I guess I also would like just to emphasize that the housing element needs to be a priority on staff time and council time, because we have a deadline with very real consequences if we don't get it done or done to the state's satisfaction. Whereas this is certainly important, but doesn't have those same deadlines. So, you know, we have a new director coming on board, and we certainly have a good consultant team for the housing element that is now on board, and hopefully we'll be making significant progress on that. That does need to be a priority, in my opinion.
Should this be 4 or 6 months from now? Is that what you were wondering, Julie? Is it a little premature to start this if we've got the other on our plate?
How long do you think this will take to come up with these 3 alternatives, assuming we hire the consultant at our July meeting?
I think this overall process is probably a year-long process.
Okay. And I have another question.
Go ahead.
Would the consultant help in terms of the layout and the design and the concept with construction cost efficiencies? Is that part of what they would be looking at?
They would. They would be looking at other municipal facilities. Likely they would have a lot of experience master planning other municipal facilities, emergency service facilities, and looking at function and cost. When I say function, efficiencies in terms of grouping. They would also be looking at what makes sense, you know, from a cost standpoint.
Go ahead.
Do we have any idea how much this kind of a project would cost?
I don't think we have an understanding of exactly what that cost could be at this time. I think that as the RFP would be put out and there would be discussions with consultants and teams, the staff would have a much better understanding and would be in a better position to give you more information. And obviously, when the proposals come in, you'll have a real market condition in terms of what is the cost, what is the range in terms of the proposal submitted?
Will the person, we had a prior scoping of the master facilities, and one of the things we were asked, for example, was, would you like to have a meeting space here? And the response back from the council was, no, we think we have plenty at Magic, at the school, and we just don't think we need to duplicate that. Will the RFP be given the kind of the council discussion from previous, so that they don't do what we did with the Commons Plan, start giving us a bunch of ideas we don't even want, and focus on things that we do? And I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, how is that person or company going to get some direction before they head off and create 3 master facilities that we don't like?
Well, they wouldn't head off and do 3 alternatives without consultation. You know, as you're finding with the housing element update, there are key informant interviews, there are surveys, there's public outreach, and clearly council members would be interviewed, spoken to gather information. So the consultant team that would do this project, this master plan, an initial part of the effort would be to research prior documents that have been prepared, studies, documents, transcripts, etc., and to conduct interviews and gather information from all of you and others. So before they would launch into developing alternatives, they need to the lay of the land, and they would do that. That's a key part of their work.
And we could build into the process of, check-ins with the council too, before they would go off on, yeah.
So Krista, do you think we have the bandwidth to launch both of these right now? You know, the housing element, obviously we're in the middle of, but this will be a big project, especially because it's not really obvious what we need or want. I mean, we know what we need, but we don't really know where should the buildings be, and how do you fit it around the redwood tree, and what about the traffic? And I mean, there's a lot to decide. So I guess my question is, are you okay if we forge ahead right now, or should we wait a couple of months to send out these RFPs?
I'd rather not do the housing element and do this. This is much more fun.
That wasn't the question.
When you hired me, this was an item that was identified as a priority and council. And I know I've worked closely with David as he's evaluated the capacity of the current community, the planning and building department staff. And we've, reorganized a bit to have a consulting planner be able to come in and a couple days a week and handle the day-to-day business, which, our bread and butter business. So that would free up planner Matthew Weintraub to help the incoming director work on these 2 projects. I know that, during the budget process, when we were talking with the public works director about the work that needs to be done just in the parking lot, and there were some concerns expressed by council members. Well, why are we going to put money in that when we've got, we're going to be doing the project? And I know just this past week we've been looking at we're going to have to make some not expensive changes certainly, but be able to accommodate our staff. We can't, in the police station is in really bad shape. And so I am concerned about putting it off. We had rain damage coming into the server room, which could have very big consequences, not only on our ability to operate, but on, having to buy new servers if we don't start getting these facilities fixed. So I think we're not going to be able to do it. I think David, when he said a year, I think that's a reasonable look at it. We're not going to be able to do it super fast, but I think we can start making progress on it. And as for the shelf life of a master plan, I mean, I know part of it is they're going to be providing the cost estimates, which of course would change. But as for the shelf life of a plan, I mean, nobody wants to have a plan and have it sit on a shelf, right? But it would last a little while.
Yes, it would.
Well, it might be a nice kind of alternate project while we sort of, drag ourselves through the housing element and find 111 sites. This is actually an exciting project for everyone, I think. So it might be a real pleasure. Okay, thank you. Councilman Cool.
I just want to point out or remind people that currently our Ross Valley Fire Department MOU or whatever it is calls for closing our firehouse in, I think it's July of 2025. So we don't have forever to do this, and it's going to take a while.
Any other questions? Are there any comments from members of the public at Town Hall? Any comments from members of the public online?
There are no raised hands, Mayor.
Thank you. So then let's bring it back to the council. And I believe we need to approve this proposed request for proposals. Is that right?
No, there's
No, you
there's
just
no
send it
action.
out?
You're just looking for direction, correct?
Pardon me. The intent is for direction. So if there are any comments, edits of the RFP, that would be one thing that we would receive and look for from you. And then if you're comfortable with the RFP basically as written, we would proceed with sending it out, receiving proposals, getting that additional information in terms of cost and who's out there that could move forward with this, do the evaluation. We have the evaluation criteria in the staff report, and then come back to you with a suggestion, a recommendation essentially on consultant selection.
Okay. Does everyone agree to go ahead with that? Councilmember McMillan.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we don't really have a choice. I think we need to go ahead, and I think given the state of the police department and the paramedics and, the staff working in a trailer, bad synergies happening and further deterioration, I think we need to go ahead as fast as we have the capacity to go and do this. I'm also really happy included in this RFP is the Kittle Park parcel, because that has been languishing for, probably a century. And the other thing that I just wanted to mention was, I believe the last I heard, the Ross Historical Society was being kicked off of the Marin Art and Garden Center site. And we may want to explore considering housing the Ross Historical Society in these new facilities. Thank you.
Any other, so it sounds as though we are fine to move ahead with this as written. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. This will be a really exciting project,
Good.
and it'll
Thank
be
you.
a great enhancement of our town's facilities. Thank you.
Good.
All right, and number 17, Town Council consideration of appointing council liaison to the Transportation Authority Marin Safe Routes to School Task Force for the Ross School District. And Beach, this is your item.
In our materials, nothing I said before I pushed the button was important. In our materials, we have a letter from Wendy Callens making some proposals, and I have talked to Wendy and asked her to clarify some things that I think are not clear from her letter. And I'm still not sure that I have a good understanding of what we're being asked to do. But as I look at that letter, we're being asked to do two things, or maybe at least one of two things. And that is, first of all, to appoint a representative to a countywide organization dealing with safe routes to school issues. And the other is to form a task force in our own town with regard to the issue of safe routes to schools. As to the latter, she says in her letter that it's directed at the, thanks. She says she wants us to form a Safe Routes to School task force for the Ross School District. But when I talked to her, she said that this entity should include somebody from Branson, and she wasn't very specific about where else it should go. The bottom line for me, frankly, is we ought to end the conversation right now and not do either of these, because I think we're a small enough community that it's silly to go through the exercise of creating a task force and appointing people to it and setting up a way that they should operate and so forth. We have, right now, our streets are in excellent shape, and we are in the process right now of 2 projects that will improve the safety of routes to school. One is on Fern Hill in front of the school, and the other is on, I don't know why I can never think of the name of that street. Anyway, I think we're in good shape and don't need a task force because maybe because of our size, maybe because of the fact that our roads are already in good shape generally. We don't need some task force to accomplish the goals that are being thought about, I think, with this proposal. So my suggestion is we politely tell them we think we've got the situation covered, and we aren't going to do either.
Councilmember McMillan.
Are there any benefits that we would be foregoing by not creating these things?
Nothing that's been spelled out so far.
Councilmember Breckes.
Well, it's been a while since I'm not at the school, Ross School, because I got 8th grader like I used to be, but there was a group that used to organize something, and they called themselves Safe Route to School.
I think they still do.
And
well, I can.
so maybe they already exist.
No, that's a county-wide operation. It's run by the Transportation Authority. They do things county-wide, like we have some kind of a day to promote getting to school without using your car coming up shortly. So we have that organization already in existence.
But I think you're right. Ross School has always had a safe routes to school, and they participated in, bike to school day and things like that. I think this is just that, to me, it seems like Transportation Authority of Marin has sort of, it's kind of like having this, organization where they're fostering task forces in every single school district, and they're providing staff, and they have a lot of data they're collecting. And I think for some of the bigger districts with a lot of streets and a lot of traffic and a lot of crossings, I think it might be helpful to have some organizational structure help you figure out where your town needs help. But I agree with Beach. I don't know that we need help. We have Ross School already involved, and we have very few streets.
So it sounds like this thing that is exactly what I'm thinking of, cupcakes if you don't walk to school and say you walk to school. But they're not going to be evaluating cross guards and things like that, and then we're not going to be eligible for those.
Well, I don't believe that this has anything to do with evaluating crossing guards. I will tell you that right now, a proposal is working its way through TAM's organization to somewhat modify, to very slightly modify the criteria that they currently use to evaluate crossing guards. And just to remind everybody, there are something like 160 roughly crossing guards in Marin County. TAM pays for as many of those as it can afford in a given year. It's been around 96 of the 160 or so, and will continue to be. So that they're not, other than changing the way that they evaluate them, there's nothing going to happen to the crossing guards program.
I don't think this has to do with crossing guards. I mean, it says Safe Routes is creating new travel plans for each district. I don't know that we really need a travel plan for our district.
Well, I agree with you completely. This is like yet another task force that we could join, but probably stopped out of.
Anybody who votes for it should be the one appointed to this.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Oh,
Roberts.
Town Manager Johnson.
Excuse me, sorry for interrupting. Our Public Works Director has some input.
Yeah, so when I was developing the grant for the Laurel Grove Safe Pathways project, I contacted TAM and said, hey, I want to be part of this. I want to get in the grant. And they're like, oh, Ross, well, you're not on the Safe Routes to School task force. I mean, they've been discussing this grant process for several months before I knew about it. And I had to scramble pretty quick. I got the grant in and we got the grant award. But I could tell that I had missed out on some of the planning and vetting process of the various projects that are happening throughout the agency. So there is some benefit, and I definitely don't want to volunteer myself for a task force.
That's exactly what I was thinking, frankly.
But there was,
Public Works is
I did have a
included.
noted benefit of that, boy, even, Parisi was involved and with TAM and they pursue grants and they notify everybody of these Safe Routes process. And I get notified a lot even without a task force, but there is a beneficial element of this task force, just for your consideration. And again, if you want me to be on that task force, I can, but there's a lot I'm doing right now, but there is some benefit.
Well, maybe you should. I mean, I don't want to lose out on grants, so maybe we should have a staff member go. And then, I mean, if we can have Chris Martin go to our flood district meetings, like we tell the school, hey, this is school, so if you want to send a board member or appoint somebody, and we'll designate that person.
But it's our own town task force, so it's going to have Public Works, they want traffic officers, city council, school district, staff, and parent volunteers, and they're meeting 3 times a year as part of the task force with the staff member from TAM. So this is like, kind of ideally, we should be able to be in touch with TAM and Safe Routes to School and find out when there's a grant, and not to have this major group of 6 to 10 people meeting every 3 times a year to talk about our streets, which don't think we have much to talk about at this point.
Mayor Robbins?
Yes.
May I just want to add that Rich and I did have a Zoom meeting with Wendy, the Safe Routes School coordinator that works for TAM. And she was first describing it to us, and that she said, she did indicate that Ross, they want to have a task force for every school district in the county. And according to Wendy, Ross is the only school district that does not have this official task force. And so when she was first describing it and what they do, and she did offer the benefit of providing a lot of information about grants and assistance with grants through their traffic consultant Parisi that works with them. And so we did offer up Rich to attend, and as needed, our police chief, if that was an enforcement thing. And she doesn't want just staff. She said very clearly that she wants a council member to be involved. And I said, okay, well, that's something that I need to take to the town council. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had to have brought this to you. We would just be a member, we would just participate as a resource like we would do in all kinds of situations. So I could offer, you know, if you decided that you didn't want to have a council member liaison, we could still participate as staff. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember McMillan.
Could we try it for a year and evaluate and see what the benefits are, and that there's no, if they're just trying to fill out their list and we're the last, you know, deadbeat that's not on the list, and we don't get any benefits, then we can say, if this isn't really working, I would be happy to be the council liaison for a year to test it out, see if there's any benefit, and if there's no benefit, then, you know, we won't do it anymore.
So nominated.
But then you need, but now you're involving someone from the police department, Public Works, somebody from Branson, one or more people from Ross School, and parent volunteers. So, I mean, and then, you know, and then they'll work on the traffic plan, which includes dot maps showing where students live in relation to the school, suggest route maps, prioritize issues list, a survey result, I mean, concept plans for high priority issues. I mean, it's really kind of agenda heavy and content weak.
If we aren't getting any benefit after a year, if it's just making maps and, you know, stuff that isn't really going to benefit us, then we can come back and say, this is, you know, we don't want to be on this list anymore, and we can cut it off. But I think the Laurel Grove safe routes thing is going to end at Canyon. We need to continue that to Poplar. And the Branson thing is kind of, everyone's thinking about it right now, but that's not really happening. You and I are going tomorrow with someone who lives on Sir Francis Drake, where people are driving 50 miles an hour, right, and swinging into the pedestrian area. Our roads are good, but the people who drive through here are not good. So I think to the extent we can enhance safety and have a year-long experiment, we should try it, and I'll be the person to do it.
Well, that's great, Julie. Thank you. Councilmember Cool.
I just want to point out again that we're being asked to do two different things, and what Julie is proposing is not to form our separate task force with all these people from Ross, and it's a lot simpler thing. Brave of her to read it.
So
Wait, I don't
Julie, you're just
understand.
going to be a task force of 3, Rich, Chief Pata, and then you. I mean, maybe that's what we should do, start small, and we can.
That makes better sense. I mean, it seems, well, the school should be involved.
Excuse
Yes,
me.
Krista.
Oh, one thing that I was concerned about when we were first speaking with Wendy was didn't want to start staffing a task force, setting it up and all the things, especially because there are other concerns I've heard from community members and council members about this topic that's not just related to schools. And so but I was assured by Wendy that this is completely TAM initiated, TAM staffed, TAM noticed, TAM everything. It's just what they are asking for. And I asked her to put the expectations in the letter to the council. Is their expectation is they would have a meeting 2 to 3 times a week. Oh, sorry, a year. And it would be and it would be via Zoom, and they would simply want the participation of a council member, Rich, and as needed, a member of our police department, which would likely be our police chief. She promised that was what was needed. All these other studies and consultants and getting information out to community members and getting their input, it's all TAM staffed. Does that I'm not sure what Mayor Pro Tem Cool you're referring to about the second the second function or the second.
The only one I saw was the separate task force here.
Beach, you gotta put your audio on.
Well, the first sentence says Safe Routes to School requests Ross participation in forming a Safe Routes to School task force for the Ross School District. And then later, she talks about having a representative or some representative in the second paragraph. No, I'm sorry, then she's talking, no.
The county-wide representative, our TAM representative, which is you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll do the local and you do the county.
I'm not sure why why this group can't form the task force without the town, why they've been waiting. If Ross is the last one in the county to do it, why did it have to be the town?
Instead of the school.
Yeah, I'm not that clear on that, but anyways, that's what I know.
Well, I mean, I do think Beach is right that we get asked to join lots of things. You know, MCCMC comes up with a new group all the time and they've asked for a council member. And we say no, because we're like, don't see the benefit. So, I mean, I'm fine if Julie, you know, maybe you need to get more clarity since you're the one who's joined this, whatever it is. And if you think it's appropriate to ask somebody and you can get their participation, great. Otherwise, you know, maybe you guys have at it. I think it's great. You know, so maybe that's what we do.
I think the real key is to make sure that these meetings have a clear agenda. Like, what is it that, you know, is it to build sidewalks, see what streets are safe, or, you know, you can't just meet to decide, you know, the structure of the group. You know, there has to, you know, the goal is safe, you know, getting to school safely. And I think for us that means sidewalks. So I think if there's any, you know, agenda, it's where do we need more sidewalks or where do we need more traffic control? And I think that if the meetings are approached with a clear agenda like that, traffic control and sidewalks where we can build them, then I think we can accomplish something. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mayor, and the school districts can't apply for capital project grants. So that's the difference. It needs to be us who pursue the grants.
Okay.
If I may,
Okay.
can we take public comment? If there is any public
Sorry,
comment.
are there any comments from members of the public in town hall? And are there any comments from members of the public online?
No, Mayor, there's not.
Right, so then thank you, Julie, for working with Rich on the task force, and we'll see. We'll wait to hear your comments about how it goes and if you think we should keep doing it. Item 18, COVID update. Town Manager Johnson.
I have no update.
Okay,
It's still out there.
fine.
Be careful.
I think that's the best update. I mean, the most concise. Number 19A, council correspondence. Is there any correspondence that people want to share that wasn't sent to all of us? And B, future council items. Councilmember Bregas.
Well, I do think we should agendize the fire department, you know, what is looked at, because I think it'd be helpful if Beach and I went into meetings with some input from the council on that
I agree.
the options being discussed. So
Okay.
like, even just giving you the last council, you know, fire department agenda and staff report so that you understand where things are going, be, I think, a good idea.
Then we're going to bring back the parking in the EV stall issue.
And then another item.
Wait, is there who's the second?
Oh, well, she agreed on mine.
I agree, absolutely, yes. And Bill, the two of you agree on the EV parking? Yes, so those
And
two
maybe
things.
the EV parking could be consent and pulled off if we really have an issue with it.
If it's an ordinance amendment, it can't be.
Okay, yes, Krista, Town Manager Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to be clear, so the parking in the EV stalls, so this would mean that we need the parking ordinance in order to be able to enforce getting people out if they're not charging, right?
That's my concept. Yeah, I think
Okay.
those spaces should be reserved for people who want to charge their car.
Okay, are you clear, Rick, on what we
Yes.
need?
What is there, and then are you also suggesting a time limit? First is restricted, but second, is there a time to that? What do you think? I mean, should that be part of the discussion?
I think I would like the staff to come up with a recommendation based on how other jurisdictions are doing it.
But we might as well talk about both at the same time,
Yes.
like, okay,
Yeah, so we don't have to talk about this again.
yes,
Okay,
okay.
And then secondly, Councilmember Brackett, about the fire board, the fire district. So at your next fire board meeting in May, you're going to be looking at the RFP because I forgot to include the RFP last night. So I'm just trying to think of timing so that I can meet your expectations here. What is the timing that you'd like this agenda item, and what would be the action?
Well, we have an all-day workshop relating to the budget, or is that?
Oh, no, not all day.
Brainstorming.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, 3 hours. And is that, what are we doing at the budget?
Yeah.
Well, the only way we could get ahead of the next fire board meeting is if we this in. And
So-
it would be informational, I'm assuming.
If it's before the next fire board meeting, there won't be anything to report.
Well, RFP will be in existence, right? And we'll,
Well, the fire board can't take any more action than we took last night before our next meeting if we put it on the April 28th agenda. Oh, yes, they can. No, they can't.
well, they could vote on RFP.
The RFP hasn't gone to the fire board. I believe the timeline that I heard was that it would be going to the board at your May meeting. I'm assuming that's 10th or something like that, May 11th. So
Well, what if we did this? Can you circulate this report, including the RFP, to all council members, just for information? And then we go to our next fire board meeting, and then we have it as a discussion item at the next council meeting, which is the following night after the RFP is voted.
except that the RFP is, I doubt that the Chief Weber is going to want to send out a draft. He's going to want feedback from the board before it's made into a public document. That's what I think he's going to be looking for. I think that's kind of what we just did with the master planning effort, is to make sure that the board is on board with the actual RFP document. So let's say that goes to the fire board on May 11th. Is what you're looking for from your colleagues here direction on comments that you would be making on that RFP?
I guess that's a question for the council. Do you want to just, I just brought it up as, a liaison report. Do you want to have discussion about it? Do you want, and just an update on what's happening over there? Or do you want to have input for us to report on an RFP, which is going to look at various things, including what I said before?
Well, do you want our input?
I sure, I think that would.
Well, I'm always interested, I mean, seriously, I'm always interested in what the rest of our council thinks about issues, but I don't think it's necessary to have. The RFP, to my mind, is not going to accomplish very much, and it's really a drafting issue rather than a substantive issue, don't you think? Okay.
You-
I don't know that I.
What if, I have a suggestion, you could ask board members, you would be, if you're taking action, if they do bring it to the fire board at the May meeting, let's say that's May 11th, and the board approves, tweaks it, approves it, whatever, then we could put that on the council's June agenda as a discussion topic.
Well, for that matter, we could put it on the May, you know,
Except
the next night.
I'm not sure we'll have a full council in May.
Uh-huh. So,
I'd be happy to do that.
we could put it on, the other choice, we put it on this April 28th meeting, and we just talk about it really fast. I don't know, what do you want to do? Do you want to?
There'll be a draft by April 28th that you can circulate.
Yeah, it's already, he already sent it around. We got it before the board meeting last night.
Oh, I thought that was the reason you couldn't act last night.
Because it was agendized and given to us far enough, so we have it now.
Okay. So I could send it to you all. It would have big draft written.
That might be helpful to discuss like for 15 minutes at the April 28th meeting, so that we could give you input. If you want it, great. If you don't want it, you don't have to take it.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you like Chief Weber to be at that meeting?
Will you talk about that another time? Can we think about that and maybe talk to you about that?
Sure. Okay.
And then the only other,
So this will be, so April 28th, we'll start with the housing element, move on to fire, and then do the budget. That's, I mean, there's just a lot of issues to talk about. We don't have much choice, I think. And that's a time, and I guess you said we won't all be here in May, but we'll see.
Thank you. That was what I had heard, but I'm not sure if plans have changed, so I don't know.
Are we all here in May? You may not
you know,
be.
I'm
Okay,
flying
so-
to Ireland, but I think I have a layover in Chicago, so I was hoping to to take my council meeting from Chicago.
Let's do fire in April, I think April
Okay.
28th.
But my next future council item was, if a council member wants to do a virtual drop-in parent, it used to be that you could do it. And I wanted to know and thought it was a good idea that we make that the rule going forward, because sometimes someone's away or someone,
In
you know,
Chicago.
if someone was sick, blah, blah, blah.
So does that need to be an agenda item, or is
I
that
don't
something
know.
we can do legally then?
I was confused why it wasn't, I don't remember, when we voted to come back, I don't know that we said, let's do the procedure which had previously existed where we could call in or do something else. So I'm confused as to why that would not be an.
I mean, why
Right.
hybrid's not also an option for the council?
Yeah.
It's an option for members of the
Always
public.
been our option.
Well, I guess my recollection, I believe, and Linda can help me, but our recollection is that the direction of the council was that the council would be here in person and staff would be here in person, and members of the public would have the ability to Zoom in, and occasionally if we had a consultant or somebody, or for somebody, they could Zoom in.
I think that is what we thought, but I mean, given that there's new technology, it is worth asking,
Let me
could a
just,
council members do
yeah, let me
that?
just briefly address that. I haven't, look, your rules are right here. There might be something in your rules that address it, assuming there's not. The council always, even pre-COVID, has the ability to call in as long as we agendize it. So when I heard about your request, the problem was the agenda had already gone out 72 hours in advance. Under the Brown Act, a council member, as long as it's less than a quorum, can call in or do any technology that allows them, but we have to notice that on the agenda and notice the location on the agenda.
And we still have to put up, wherever we are, a hotel or something, you have to put up a sign.
So Chicago O'Hare will have to have a sign for
Fine.
Councilmember Breckus
Cost 10.
and be accessible to the public. So I mean, that's pre-COVID rules that still are in effect when we come back now. If you wanted to have more flexibility than that, we'd have to adopt the AB 361 resolution that we used to adopt in order to allow council members to remote in as well as the public on an ongoing basis without providing that notice.
You have to do that every month.
Every 30 days, correct?
And does that expire in October, the ability to do AB 361?
I'd have to look at the date. I know it does expire. I think
At
it's the
some
end
point.
of the year or,
Mhm.
yeah.
I believe that was how San Anselmo described what their council is doing, is every month in the discussion of, and they're still having the resolution 360.
I mean, Foster, the other place I'm city attorney for, Foster City, does it that way. The council members have the ability. We adopt the resolution every 30 days. You have to make findings of why you're doing that for the public health in order to reduce capacity in the chambers to allow the, so it would be a similar resolution we'd have on a monthly basis. Or one of my other cities, we're just following the old Brown Act rules. If someone wants to remote in, we just have to know 72 hours in advance.
There is a bill in front of the legislature to take out that provision in the Brown, or something in the Brown Act that has to do with, at least with the posting of a sign where the person is remotely.
So back to the item, like, is this an agenda item or are we, where, I don't think I quite understand where do things stand. Obviously, you can phone in 72 hours ahead.
But you have to, it has to go on the agenda, so.
Right, I mean,
that-
sorry, you can phone in if you agendize it 72 hours ahead. And you can remote in if we adopt this resolution every month?
Yes, if we had that resolution, we'd be able to have council members as well as public remoting in without any notice whatsoever.
Well, I think we should do that. That was, but we're already doing that, or do we need to? Put that on
No,
the-
we would need to put it on the
Yeah,
agenda.
but our packet comes out on Friday, so that eliminates the option of a council member saying, my spouse or my child has COVID, and I now need to go remote to this meeting. Because on Friday, you have to, the agenda goes out. If the agenda doesn't
You
go
know
out
what,
saying,
But Monday
Beach isn't
afternoon,
gonna
it
go.
could be a Monday afternoon agenda, but it's just, it has to be 72 hours ahead.
notice.
It can be redone. We do it early, we do it Friday, but it only has to be 72 hours. So we could,
We would have to amend the agenda,
Pardon me?
and that, is that a big pain, or?
as long as it's 72 hours.
It's
yeah.
posted, yeah.
All right, well, people think that's the better option, and
I think we should have both. Why wouldn't we have both?
Well, isn't the discussion now is should we have something on the agenda?
Sounds like we should have that monthly thing that we approve so that people can remote in. So that should be on the agenda next month.
Okay.
On the consent, right. So that's the agenda item. And then we have two options.
Not
Yeah, AB 361.
Is it AB, is it
Okay.
360?
I mean, I think people will come, except that if you are away, this is a way you can still participate, and we can have all of us offer our opinions, even if someone is away. I mean, that would be wonderful, because sometimes schedules just don't fit for everyone to come. So that's how I see it as a real bet. I think we'll all come. All right, then, are there any other agenda items?
I have one.
Oh, yes.
We've so many things on the agenda. I was almost reluctant to raise this, but I've been thinking about it for a while. Rush, but this could be on the June agenda. But what I would propose is that we agendize the matter of the utility poles along Sir Francis Drake and Lagunitas that are leaning, some of them I think precariously. These are main evacuation routes, and what I would like to agendize is a discussion of, or the possibility of actually having a letter come from the council signed by the mayor to PG&E asking them to address this, saying we're concerned about the danger of these leaning poles that do appear to be in, some of them in somewhat precarious states of repair, with a copy to our elected representatives in Sacramento and to the PUC.
But I wonder if, Rich, it sounds like almost a public works item. I wonder if such a letter could just be on the consent agenda and then we all approve it. Because you're putting it on the agenda because you want everyone to sign it. But all of the kind of legwork to it doesn't have to be at the meeting. But Krista?
I was saying that it's not almost Rich, it would be Rich to do it. Sorry, it's late in the evening. But I mean, we could do an agenda item, so authorize the mayor to send a letter on behalf of the city council to PG&E asking that the polls be addressed. I actually, though, like the idea of getting the PG&E government liaison rep to come here and hear the council and the community concerns. What do you think, Rich?
I think that's a good idea. I can get Mark Gorder, the North Bay
Who sends the
rep
emails?
for public agencies to come.
Yeah. So that would lend itself to being more of a regular agenda item.
Okay, fine.
That's all right.
Sure.
Are there any other agenda items? Then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.